Welcome to another episode of CrossTalk, 5th Plymouth District. As you've come to experience, this particular show is just like the other series of CrossTalks, as it is designed to feature your local state representative, depending on what part of the district you're in, as we have a couple of different crosstalks for state representatives. And of course, we have one for your state senator, Mike Brady. We have State Representative David DeCoste joining us on this day. Representative.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back. Well, it's your show, so thank you for allowing us to kind of sit down and get caught up with you. Here we are.
Talking before the election, so I guess since 2014 we've been talking to each other.
We have.
That's right.
So right now we are cruising into the fall of 2025.
Our second decade.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are... last time we talked was prior to the fiscal year 26 budget passing. Don't know if you want to kind of touch upon, this was kind of a different year where I think that the budget was passed before the turn of the fiscal year, or somewhere therein. I don't know if you want to touch upon that, how your district, how it did. We're also going to talk a little bit about some potential 9C cuts. But let's first start off with talking about the budget process and how it was for you and your district.
Well, it went well. I mean, we saw funding increases, and I think the and inclusive of all the money. So Chapter 70 and Chapter 90, and I think that the subsequent supplemental budgets will be pretty kind to the local area, I think. Since we spoke, I guess, a week or so ago, the July numbers have firmed up, and they're firmer than we expect. So the district's doing well. We're doing, there are some concerns. I guess we'll talk in a little bit, because I wish the state would focus a little bit more on water utilities and try to help getting with the PFAS situation. I wish they would have spent a little bit more on our local housing authorities, because they do a fantastic job. So, and I don't, just probably over the next half hour we'll touch on a lot of this stuff. But overall, we're good. And I was surprised, if you read, I guess I'll put in a plug for both the Mass Taxpayers Foundation and the Pioneer Institute that I look at. It could be the Pioneers a little more on the conservative side. Mass Taxpayers, I think, are just generic numbers, and they analyze it. But in both cases, they, initial results look good. So we'll see what happens, and we'll also see what happens on the federal level, because, as you know, we have run into some funding problems there, depending on which route the state wants to go.
It's worth noting, and I've talked with you about this in the past, and I've had the conversations with other legislators, seeing the significant jump. We look at what the fiscal 25 budget was for the state. I think it was somewhere around $57 billion, and we saw another significant jump up to about $62 billion. That's a lot of money. Can we continue as a Commonwealth to keep seeing increases in our state budget like that?
Well, we have to, and I think one of the positive things that we're mandated by our Constitution to have a budget, and the state does some fairly, as an example, some prudent things. When we have intake, when we have revenues above projections, a piece of those revenues are automatically put into pension and rainy day funds, automatically, right off the top. And I think that's a wise thing to do, because, at some point we will run into some tough times, and it's good to have that cushion. As to what's going on in the future, so far so good, and it looks like we're going to be okay. Again, things weren't directed if maybe as quite the priorities that I would have had, but one problem, and you alluded that we keep an eye on, is the growth in mass health, and that's still concerning. that's still very concerning, and because as the population ages, we have a larger and larger component on that. And then, of course, we have our new arrivals that we've decided we're going to fund, and that is incredibly expensive, and we don't track it. So while, it's no secret, we've had some questions about housing, and, we switched them from hotels, and now they're going to private residences. Well, one thing we don't track is the associated health costs, and they tend to be pretty substantial. But in the aggregate, we're doing so. First month into it, we're doing okay, and we'll know the August numbers sometime, second or third week in September.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the governor's office has offered that, or hinted that we could see some possible 9C cuts because of the uncertainty of what we could lose for federal funding because of the political climate. What have you heard about what programs and services might be on the chopping block this time around?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the governor's doing that prudent management, but she might be seeing things that we're not seeing or even reading in the paper yet. I can tell you one thing, that my office over the last couple of weeks has seen a pronounced increase in the number of unemployment claims. So if they're seeing that at a state level within the Commonwealth, that might be one thing that's prompting her to, from what she's done specifically, is let the towns and the municipalities know that although the earmarks are there, the bottom line is they won't be distributed for a while. And they've got a new system where we kind of have to let our local, my four towns of Hanson, Hanover, Norwell, and Rockland, we kind of monitor what's coming in. And we have the bureaucrats in Boston who manage this and do a good job, but they'll let us know, hey, this town hasn't gone after this earmark. Let them know they have to go. And then we let the finance people know. Now, to answer your question specifically, all I can tell you is in the past, there were public safety grants that were either reduced, typically they were reduced, not eliminated. And we also had, for instance, 2 grants to the Rockland and the Norwell Council on Aging that got chopped in half. So, and to their credit, they did not, this was pretty well distributed through the state. They did not pick on, the people in the wrong party or the other party. It was pretty well distributed. I could not, in some cases, I could not fathom what they were doing, because a few of them that were cuts in other places that what I thought amounted to public health and public safety, and I would have cut other areas. But I think by and large, they did it fairly and consistently, and it made sense. If I had to cut something, it would not be public health or public safety.
It's interesting you mentioned about the uptick of unemployment claims. Are we seeing the economy slow? Are we seeing job growth slowing? What are your concerns, and what needs to be done moving forward?
Well, I talked to my colleague, Rep. Moschino, the other day at another event we had, and she's seeing the same thing. And we come from fairly prosperous areas. My 4 towns are fairly prosperous, and she represents Hull, Cohasset, and Hingham.
Hingham, yeah.
And they're seeing the same thing. So I'm not sure what is going on, but I can tell you that there have been in talking to the local businesses. I know they're not expanding right now in this area. So by and large, with some exceptions. So we'll see what's going on. I'm not quite sure, but the good news is that in my case, I'll put a plug in for my aide Abby. Corman Abby has been with us, I guess, now 3 years.
Does a great job.
She does a fantastic job, and we are very, very lucky to have her in the Plymouth 5th. She does a terrific job, not only now, for her own district, but she's become a mentor, I guess, regionally for people who, new people coming on, and she does a good job running our intern program, so, among other things.
I know one of the things you want to make sure we touch upon is not only housing, but your work with some of the housing authorities and discussion about rent control. We know that housing has been in the headlines the past couple of years, whether it's about there being a housing shortage to the MBTA Communities Act, which there's been court cases and pushback from communities, the 177 communities that are either adjacent to or a neighboring community when it comes to the commuter rail system. Give me your thoughts on housing at this point, especially in your district.
Smiling. The whole setup of that is the whole scheme is a bit vague in terms of how they tie adjacent communities in, but it's not really. Yeah. Let's go from the broader to the specific. I mean, the specific in my area are always my housing authorities, because I think it's fair to say I'm one of the foremost advocates of housing authorities in the legislature. By the way, that is in both parties, right across the ideological spectrum. I think most of us, the vast majority, huge advocates of that. They do a great job. The MBT communities and 40B, actually, when you look at both of those programs, are doing very little to produce real housing. You know, the threshold for 40B and the MBTA is 80% of the I think it's the average median income of well in this area that's $70,000 or $80,000, $90,000 a year, depending on which towns you're talking about. That's not affordable housing. Affordable housing is what you find, for instance, in Rockland Housing Authority, Norwell Housing, Henson Housing Authority, where roughly, and the last time I checked, they are providing, modest square footage of units, everything included, for under $400 a month. Still under $400 a month. That is what the state should be subsidizing. Not, and I'm probably as much of a capitalist as any Republican in this state. But if the goal is to produce affordable housing, it's not funding local developers who build only 10% affordable, what they call affordable, which really isn't, and 90% market rate. You would want to subsidize the local housing authorities, and so that's what we advocate for. And this budget, in that respect, I was going to say it was a lot disappointing, to be honest with you. I think we could have done a lot more, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the city of Brockton or Boston or in Norwell, Hanson, Rockland, or Hanover. We did not do a good job with that.
But how important is rent control in these days? If you're somebody who is the regular Joe or Jane who's going to work, rents aren't through, unless you own a home, right? It seems as though having a mortgage is far more cheaper than to rent, because these days you need close to 10 grand if you're going to be moving into a new place for first, last, and security. It's outrageous.
I have a constituent, and I won't, just one of the towns, and she's a 72-year-old nurse. And she has a one-bedroom apartment in one of the recently completed buildings, and they are raising her rent by $1,000 a month. And that's what we're facing right now. So there are better ways to do it. You're right. And without delving too much into this issue, but the vice president made a good point, and it has to do with what's here. We have in this state 300,000 people. My guess is that count is low, who are not supposed to be in the state to begin with, and they're living somewhere. And that absolutely drives up the price of housing all through the area. And in many cases, they're occupying subsidized housing. They're not supposed to be, but they are. So my hope is that with federal policies that we're going to address that at some point. It is frustrating to see the number, and I just first got off the phone this week with several people at the Norwell Housing Authority, and we have had elderly, and the housing authorities were sold, by the way, as local elderly housing, but we've had elderly people on these waiting lists forever, for years, not months, years, many months, and the state now has taken over the function, by and large, of placing them, and it's very difficult to get our local elderly, and I should say, additionally, they also house locally developmentally disabled individuals who are capable of independent, both of those groups into the housing, and we can't do it locally. We have some great people moving in there, but they would tell you they put a preferred to stay where they were, and that's a matter of policy at the state. And it's something I'm hoping that we look at. And if I could digress a bit,
Please.
We have right now in the Republican Party 2 individuals who are looking to run against the incumbent governor. And matter of fact, I met both of them at the event with the sheriff this weekend, his annual barbecue. And it's the one thing I talked to them about, that and the Votech lottery that was spoken. I would
we're gonna
make
talk
sure
about
both of those know the damage that the state housing people are doing to our local housing placement. They're hurting a lot of elderly people. They really are.
Why not go with the local control instead of state control? I would think that local control, you have a better idea as to the needs of the community and who might be sitting on a waiting list, and be fair and equitable when it comes to that.
Right, but first of all, if you do that, there are a lot of well-paid bureaucrats in Boston who can no longer justify their jobs.
I see.
Number one, and number two, there is a need for emergency housing. But even if you went something along the lines that when a vacancy occurs, the state could fill one and the local people would fill another, that would go a long way to do. And I've actually put in legislation for that. I think if it got on the board and people were not pressured, as they are in our legislature, to vote party line, I think it would pass. But like so many other things in the Massachusetts legislature, we're lucky to get things out of committee, never mind on the board. And I think if you talk to people, maybe confidentially at least, you'll hear the same, and I'm sure you do, the same level of frustration for people in both parties. But we will keep pegging away on that. And my hope is that if we do, if the Republican Party does take the corner office, either of the Mike Keneally or Brian Shortsleeve, either one of them will be aware of that and addressing the problems that they're wreaking havoc with the Votex as well, or will be. And by the way, our ag schools.
It's worth noting that if you can watch those interviews, I've had a chance to sit down with Brian and Mike and get an idea as to where their campaign is at this particular juncture. Hopefully, at the start of 2026, we'll sit down with them again, kind of see where things are when it comes to the campaign trail. You've teased and alluded to in regards to a lottery that DESE is implementing when it comes to being able to have access to a trade school like a South Shore Technical High School. You and I are big advocates of that particular institution, and many of them that are in and around the Commonwealth, knowing that there is a shortage. We're seeing a shortage because you got a lot of journeymen who are retiring, and not enough individuals who are going to be able to backfill, whether it's plumbers, electricians. You talk about any of the trades. Mm-hmm. And they'll say that there's just not enough individuals to fill those open spots, to be able to accommodate people, whether it's new housing or repairs.
Yeah. Well, you touched on two things. So we're talking the Votech a little bit, because that's normally, I'd like to finish up with those type of things, because that's one of the positive stories. With the state interference with the Votechs have come, in a number of ways very quickly. There was a hoisting program, which has to do with, the practical impact on the Votech is using tractors and so forth, and having kids learn how to. Well, for a while they required a hoisting license, so the kids. And this was just a change in policy. One of our bureaucrats up there woke up one morning and decided they were going to reinterpret a rule, and this prevented. All of our students from using the local Kubota at the Votech. Yeah. That takes away a significant amount of. They need to know how to do that. And we also have the same thing with DESE. DESE, our superintendents and the people who look at applications are no longer going to be allowed to pick the best performing students. And oh, by the way. It gives less of an incentive to somebody who wants to, because the Votechs have become quite competitive.
Yes.
I graduated in 1981, and for some of there were always good schools, and God knows the number of millionaires that graduated in the class of '81 now, who are plumbers and carpenters and electricians. I know they've done quite well, sure. But it is now even more in demand. And in my district, I believe in this area for the South Shore I believe it is Whitman, Abington, and Rockland, the top three. They will not have enough slots for that to be filled. And in the case of those towns, if you're a hardworking student in Rockland Middle School and plan to get in, that's not going to count for anything or as much before. So you can't have, again, once, students who might be marginal, who will begin classes at the VOTEC, and someone who's done superbly is passed over, and it's unfair, it's unwise, it's horrible policy. And by the way, I should say, if you end up getting a poor performer or a discipline problem, you can't have those type of people working around heavy equipment, bandsaws, welding equipment, Kubotas. You can't have them doing that, and so they're going to be removed by their school and sent back to where they were. And the talented people will never be there, or may have to wait till junior, senior, or sophomore, junior, senior years.
Is there any way of reversing this action by DESE right now? Is there legislation that's in the works?
Well, this legislation, I'm not sure how much it's going to get moved. I wish the governor had picked up the phone and told them to reverse this. This is where electing, and if it could be partisan, electing a Republican governor would change that. And I think that if we had a Governor Keneally or a Governor Shortsleeve, that type of policy would be reversed immediately.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of schools, staying on the subject of schools, your counterparts in the Senate passed a bill banning cell phone use and electronic devices in K through 12 facilities. I believe the House is working on something similar now. I don't know if it's going to be...
I sponsored one at the behest of one of my constituents, well, actually, several of my constituents in Norwell and Hanover. And it is quite similar with some margins, but we did it in conjunction with a couple of retired school teachers, and we took the bill based on what had been done in several other states. And it has wide support among people in educators, the teachers' unions seem to support it, and many parents do. So if I had to point to something that might get signed into legislation, if I had to bet one way or another, I think you'll see Governor Healy sign something into law before the session ends.
I know that probably the biggest concern these days is parents love to have that ability to connect with their child at all hours of the day, and not being able to do that. Would the legislation that you're aware of, would they be prevented from using it at all in schools, only at certain periods?
Well, that's what's holding up the debate. How much discretion do administrators have, or parents have? And then, the kids are clever. As one told, as
I've heard stories.
Yeah, one of my cousins told me, and my younger cousins, they said they'll just give them a burner phone and keep
burner phone, exactly.
Give them the burner phone and keep the real phone. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
AT&T and Verizon are definitely would be making out the track phones if those are still available.
They'll borrow their uncle's burned out
burner phones. Yep. Burner phones in school.
There you go.
We got a few minutes left here in our conversation. It's been a great one. Anything that we've overlooked in the topics we've discussed? Well,
let's talk a little bit about the VOTEC and what's going on down there.
Please do. Well, let's not forget they're going to be building a new school.
Well, and that's to your point. You said all the other, and while you were speaking there, I was thinking the increased in possible subjects to include. By the way, right now the Hanover firefighters, in conjunction with other firefighters, are doing EMT training. Now, that might become something permanent down there. Where you can get your EMT. They're talking about, right now, there's no plumbing. There's HVAC, but there's no plumbing. They might have a plumbing program. But what I get excited about are two things. Number one, the buildings sit largely empty during, certainly summers and nights. There has been some talk about implementing a night school or summer school where, say, someone from one of the surrounding towns, Hanson, Whitman-Hanson, or Norwell, Rockland, Hanover, could go there during the summer and get the same course, accelerated full-time that their peers are getting over June, July, and August for credit. So you could train them up in a trade. They would qualify and get credit, perhaps towards early graduation. I'm a firm believer in early graduation for those students who want to accelerate. I tell you, as an accounting student, I had a superb teacher in Norwell High School, and everything that she taught me prepped me wonderfully for Northeastern University. But to be honest, Northeastern taught me nothing in 101, 102, 201. I don't think I learned anything new until 202 because I had just superb training. Now, think about what somebody could go to free school at Massasoit, take those same accounting courses for credit not only at Massasoit, but for early graduation from high school. So that if you had motivated students, and there are quite a few of them, who want to leave a semester or two early, and then they would graduate, maybe come back and graduate with their year at graduation, but spending that year at a college level, finishing up a degree at Massasoit and then moving into the other state school. I will tell you that one change, and it's a positive thing, is that a lot of the local schools are becoming much more open for taking course credit in full towards their degrees. And I'm thinking in terms of Wheaton, Curry, Stonehill, that they really, and believe it or not, the problem schools have been state schools. There's a reason for that, and I won't get into it. But if you talk to the folks over at Massasoit, Stonehill, Wheaton, Curry, in our area, Quincy, also has many degrees, say in the same boat, that the local schools, when you go to get your baccalaureate, are much more open to take, particularly if you're excelling in those courses. And someone who gets an A in accounting from Massasoit should get their courses transferred to Bridgewater or Stonehill, whatever. Because you could have somebody who 19 or 20 years old is very close to completing their baccalaureate, and I think that's a positive thing.
I've just been given the high side, and we got less than 2 minutes left.
Less than 2 minutes.
Folks want to be able to reach out to you, your office. How can they get in touch with you? Go to the State House site, or really the best way is just my office hours. First of all, I'm at the Council on Aging's the first and third Fridays of every week. Of every month, excuse me. The second Fridays, I'm at the town offices, and I start at Norwell, Hanover, and then finish in Rockland. And it's always 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m. The town offices and the Council on Aging's, when they publish when I'm going to be there, we've kept pretty much the same schedule since I was sworn in 2015. And then we've added, over the last few years, I am at the Rockland Library the second Tuesday of every month from 6 to 7, and there's a little bit of play there, so if someone comes in later, the library, and by the way, thank you to Rockland Public Library and all of the towns, because they've just been great in terms of providing service. But we could sit late in Rockland and talk, or they can email is usually the best, and it's just david.decoste@mahouse.gov. Email me, and all three Council on Aging's and the town halls have my cards, and all my information's on there. So rather than pass it on, and it's there. And we look forward to that. One of the nicer things about this job, and you've met our district is full of some talented people doing great things. I want to thank you for coming in and providing an update to the folks in the 5th Plymouth. And we look forward to our next conversation, either towards the end of the year or 2026 at the start of the second half of the legislative session. Maybe we'll get some surprises in October, November. Who knows? There you go. Right. We want to thank you for tuning in to a show like Crosstalk, one of the different series that we have. This one, of course, the 5th Plymouth. Again, thank you for tuning in, and until our next conversation, have yourself a great day.